right guys, this is worth millions at least. Could be even argued be worth tens of millions or even hundreds of millions. I used a crafting spreadsheet for everything that got me in that 296 million gold mailbox opening I did. I think it's about 5 or 6 weeks ago now. So it's a really, really useful tool for professions and crafting and stuff like that. So that's what we're going to look at today. We're going to look at making your own crafting sheets because I know a lot of you have been asking about this. Now, it really is such a powerful tool. It doesn't make you gold just by having a crafting sheet, but it definitely makes the process a lot easier, or I find it a lot easier anyway. So as you guys have seen, if you've watched the streams, I do use CraftSim for some stuff, but I don't use it for a lot of stuff. I much prefer to use my my own crafting sheet with all my information on there. And there's a few reasons for that as to the advantages of using a crafting sheet, but we will go through everything in this video basically. Now, this definitely requires more work than just using an add-on. There is no doubt about that whatsoever, but I really do think that it is worth the effort. So, quick disclaimer here, I'm absolutely not an expert on Excel, spreadsheets, anything like that. Everything here is just all self-taught. So I'm not really an expert or anything like that. So if you guys have any tips or suggestions, then I'm quite happy to take anything on board that you say as well. And you can put all that in the comments below. Now I'm going to do this with inscription because a lot of you have been watching me doing the inscription throughout this expansion, and because there is a good sort of production process. So we're going to go from herbs, turning them into pigments, turning them into inks, turning them into boundless ciphers. And that's what we want. We want to be able to put in our herb prices and see what our boundless cipher crafting price is after we've gone through all those layers of production. And it's very difficult for a sort of an add-on to do that sort of thing. And that's one of the main advantages of having this. So you can literally just put the herb prices in, and out the other end comes sort of your crafting cost of everything that you can make, basically. How do we do all the complicated maths then? Because we've got resourcefulness, we've got multicraft, all of this is quite complicated. And how we get around that is by not doing basically hardly any maths whatsoever. We're just going to keep things as simple and as easy as possible. So basically, we are just going to do an in and out calculation. So we put everything in, and then whatever comes out the other end, if you do it enough times, then from that, then you are able to work out an average of what you get. So for example, say you have something that requires 10 herbs that cost 10 gold each. So it's 100 gold per craft. And every time you craft, you get 2 of them. Then you know that 100 gold is split between the 2 items, that it's 50 gold per item. And that's basically what we want to know. We want to know how much it costs us per item. So from there, we can figure out how much we need to sell it for on the auction house to make a profit. And like I said, we want to do that. We want to be able to put the numbers in and it go all the way through, and we can see the numbers for all the different layers of vertical integration that we're going to do here. Material costs for boundless ciphers on here. So if we just pull that across slightly, put distilled water, we need lure drop, we need can't remember how to spell it, and then we're going to go lure drop pigment. I might have to fast forward this bit a little bit. We're not too bothered about spellings. And then we're going to put that into, then we will craft boundless ciphers. Boundless ciphers are also going to take Rafa's spear and boundless cipher. So what I'm actually going to do is I will just move those to there. So there we go. So what we've got now is we've got our base materials on the left and we've got our crafted stuff on the right. So distilled water first. What's the price of this distilled water? Is 0.091, because if you think one's a gold, then 91 copper is 0.091. So price for lure drop, we're going to just assume rank 1 for now. So that was 17.54. I just saw that before we went. So they're at 8.41. And obviously these numbers don't really mean much at the moment. And let's just say 15.29 there. So we've got some basic numbers there. So as you can see there, I've just made sort of a mini table. So on the left, we've got the basic materials that we're going to be using. So that's sort of the stuff that we're buying from the auction house and stuff like that. Now, to make the lure drop pigment, what we'll do is we will mill a load of herbs over and over and over again. Now, I tend to like to be doing sort of 10,000 crafts to sort of get sort of the average. If you do 1,000, I think that's not enough, but it can get you some basic numbers to start getting things together. So what you see here on the left, we have all the basic materials that are going to be going into what we are crafting. And these here, the numbers that are in that sort of, we'll put it in a box, we'll put it in that box. Those are the only numbers that we are going to be needing to change. In fact, we can even do that because the top one is a vendor bought item, so that's never going to change. So the only numbers that we need to change on this whole sheet are going to be the ones that are sort of in that bold box there, because those are going to be the prices on the auction house that change it. So what we do then is we come over here and we see that to mill a lure drop, it takes 10 herbs to mill a lure drop. So what we're going to say, the crafting cost of a lure drop pigment is whatever our lure drop is times 10. So that's simple. It takes us 10. It takes us 10 lure drop to do a mill. That is the crafting cost. That is the basic crafting cost of the lure drop. Now, when I do this myself, I put everything into basically one column and it makes everything look neater. But when you are learning to do this and putting it all together, it's easier to have it all in separate tables. I would say that's definitely true. Now, what we then find is we are going to mill loads and loads, thousands and thousands, even tens of thousands of herbs to see what the average is that comes out. So if, say, you mill 100, and you might find the average is 1.7. You mill 1,000, you might find the average is 1.6. You mill 100,000, you might find the average is 1.4. And obviously, the more you are running, the more accurate it is going to be. So by doing this, like I said, you don't have to work out multi-craft, you don't have to work out resourcefulness, you don't have to work any of that stuff out. You just need to know what you're putting in, what's going out, and from that, you can work out your average cost. So what we say then, let's say, and like I said, these numbers are all completely made up off the top of my head. Let's say the average items we get per craft is 1.4. So for every 10 lure drop, we average 14 pigments. And that's what comes out the other end when we've crafted tens of thousands of these. So what we then know, so the cost per item then is simply whatever our crafting cost is divided by how many items we get. So we saw it before where if you had 100 crafting costs and you get 2 items, then it's obviously 50 each. So all we're doing is we're splitting that crafting cost between the 1.4. That is basically it. So then we'll move on to the next pigment and we'll say, right, we need equals 10 times that. And then we say, okay, then the items per craft, we'll say that comes out the same because that's also pigment. We can then pull that down and that should have done that divided by that. And there we go. From that, we have then got the cost of our 2 pigments. That's our basic crafting cost there. So next we want to move on and we want to craft the inks. So we can see here in the top left, we've got the crafting cost of the inks, and we have the crafting cost of the inks as 20 times the distilled water, plus we need 5 lure drop pigments. So we're going to go 5 times our crafting cost of lure drop pigment, plus 10 times our other pigment. Now, that has given us the basic crafting cost for the ink. But once again, we need to know how many items we get per craft. And like I said, once again, you need to be crafting lots and lots and lots of these. And like I said, we're talking in the thousands, not like in the dozens. Let's say we craft loads and loads of those and we find out that the average ink we get, say we get an average of 1.3. So once again, this time we're going to get 1.3 items per craft. Once again, we will drag that down. So we can see here that the crafting cost for our ink is 945, and that's based on those prices if we crafted our herbs into pigments and our pigments into inks. So next, we are going to repeat the process again, but this time we go for the boundless cipher. So the boundless cipher is going to use 20 distilled water again, and you can see now why I'm always running out of these waters in stream. It's going to use 2 times of the ink we just made, so we'll take the crafting cost of that. And it's also going to use 5 Rapha Spear, which we've got there. So once again, this is the basic. We now have a basic crafting cost for our boundless ciphers. And once again, craft loads and loads and loads and loads of these. See, like I said, input versus output over thousands of crafts. And once again, you can see what the sort of the average is. And from that, you can figure out. So like I said, if you craft 10,000 and you get 17,000 out, then you know you're averaging 1.7 per craft. So let's say that's what happens. We craft 10,000 boundless ciphers. We get 17,000 out exactly. Nice round number. So we'll put the 1.7 in there. And that means our average crafting cost on a boundless cipher is 1,158.2. And now we are in a situation whereby we can change any of the numbers. So the price of lure drop goes down to 16. And all the other numbers, whatever we change in here, are just going to update accordingly. And we can always see what our crafting cost is. Now, the other thing I like to have on here, I like to add on the end, as you can see in the bottom right on my one, auction house break even. And all this is going to be, we're going to do that number divided 0.95. And this is basically what you need to sell it for at the auction house to break even. So basically that number there, you sell it at that and then minus the auction house cut, then that is going to basically be what your crafting cost is sort of to break even. Now, something else that some people do, we could, for example, add down here, we're going to put down like auction house prices, and let's say lure drop pigment. So some people want to know, oh, what is the gold per hour from this? So let's just put gold per hour there. So let's say, so this is going to be the auction house prices for the lure drop pigment. Let's say the lure drop pigment is selling for 138 gold. So what we are then going to do is we will move that one up a little bit just to give us a bit more space. GPH can go on there for a second. And profit. So this is the profit that you are crafting on the auction house. So we can say that we will take the current price on the auction house minus away from the price we need to sell at in order to break even, which is that. So you can see here that our profit at the moment is 17.7 gold per lure drop pigment. And then if, for example, you know that you can craft, let's say 2,000 lure drop pigment an hour, you can say, right, that's 2,000 times whatever our profit margin is. And you can see there that the profit margin based on these numbers is 35,400 gold an hour crafting lure drop pigments. But in order to do that calculation, you need to add in the auction house prices and you need to know how many you craft per hour to do that. And I don't tend to like having the gold per hour number on there because I don't find it particularly useful. It's a number that's thrown around a lot in sort of a lot of the gold making community, especially when people are newer. But to me, this is the number you need. You need to know what you need to sell it for on the auction house to be breaking even. And you know, like if I'm got that lure drop pigment at 120, I have to sell it at 120. If I sell it at 130, I have my 10 gold profit for every lure drop pigment I sell because of that. Now, we've obviously done this calculation all the way through. So we've done the pigments, we've done the inks, we've done the boundless ciphers. You can sell at every single level here if it's profitable. But obviously, you can see this quite easy. And this is why a lot of the time, things like boundless ciphers, inks and stuff like that look like they're not a profit. Because CraftSim and stuff like that, if you're not using price overrides, will just be assuming you're buying stuff off the auction house, which obviously you're not doing if you're doing it this way. So doing it this way, you can see all the numbers and stuff like that. And that is basically the bones of what it is. Obviously, mine looks more fancy. Mine looks, I say fancy, it looks probably terrible compared to what most of you guys can do. But, it just looks better. But at the end of the day, how it works is the same pretty much as this one at the top here. And any of you guys can do this that sort of have a spreadsheet program. And like I said, it's not that particularly difficult. Now, the advantages I find in the sheet are basically what you've seen, you can very quickly put numbers in here and it will very quickly churn out a load of numbers that you can sort of use yourself. Now, I see a lot of people when they're doing crafting sheets, they use sort of macros and auctionator and all this sort of thing to automatically put prices in. I don't really like that because I haven't found a way where, say, if you're going to sort of buy 10,000 lure drop to turn into pigments, so what's the average price on that 10,000 lure drop? If you just look at the lowest price one, that is not an average. So for example, if we go on here, open this up a minute, and if we look at the price of lure drop, so we see there the price of lure drop is 17.53, the lowest one. But if we buy 10,000, then the average price is 17.73. So your numbers, if you just take the lowest number and times it by 10,000, that does not get you an accurate number. And to be fair, that's quite close. Sometimes it can be like up to a gold difference, and that can have a significant effect through your calculations if you are not doing it correct. So you can't just take that bottom number and say, oh, it's whatever that is times 10,000, because most of the time there won't be 10,000 on the auction house. So that's why I don't use automatic. That's why I don't automatically pull the numbers across. This is why I manually do my numbers, because I can't find a way where you get that average of 10,000 herbs and for it to do it accurately. Now, the disadvantage of sheets is it's based on the character that does the crafting. So this means that if somebody does not have an identical character to you, they cannot use that crafting sheet because the numbers won't be accurate. You'll have different multi-craft, different resourcefulness, different whatever. On top of that, if anything changes, then all your numbers become useless. So this is why I like to do things as a BIS crafter, because then you know nothing with the character is going to change. Now, at the start of the War Within, my specs were checked as you were getting more and more knowledge points and upgrading gear and stuff like that all the time. Things are changing all the time. And this is why it's an advantage to be able to do this yourself, because as things are changing, then you can be updating your sheet accordingly. Whereas, like, if at the beginning of the expansion, my BIS crafting sheet isn't particularly useful to a lot of people because not a lot of people have BIS crafters. And at that point, you need to be able to do it yourself, because at that point, you're not a BIS crafter and sort of that sheet's going to be useless for you. Now, the biggest problem there's two big problems with doing sheets. One is time. It is extremely time consuming to do this. Believe me, as someone that has done it like across every profession, it is very time consuming. But the factor that will affect most people, the thing that will concern most people, won't be the time, it will be the cost, because it can cost huge amounts. You can lose huge amounts of gold doing this because you are testing things and you don't really know what the results are going to be. And I have had times, and I've talked about it on stream, when I tested rank 3 bismuth for prospecting sort of a couple of months ago, and I lost 1.2 million gold. I mean, that loss just to test 10,000 bismuth ore. And that's the sort of things that can happen when you are making these crafting sheets, because you just don't know what the outcomes are going to be. And sometimes you will lose quite a lot of gold from the process of doing this. And like I said, that's the main disadvantage of this. The other thing is, it's not just changes in your character that can make it so you need to redo your sheet. So for example, I've done all my sheet, but when the Bountiful Season file clicks over to resourcefulness, suddenly everyone's going to have more resourcefulness for crafting. All the numbers need doing completely from scratch again. And this is the problem with doing things like this, is it's great, but when there's changes, then you have to adapt it accordingly, and you have to redo the numbers and things like that. So I do think it's significantly better than using an add-on, because like you said, it's just such a useful way to be able to do things, basically. And obviously we've talked about inscription, but the same principle applies for any sort of crafting. So it's the same with disenchanting, it's the same with prospecting or shattering or anything like that. It's the same process. You just do something lots of times, get what comes in, average what comes out, and from there you can predict future results if you have enough outcomes for it. Now there's a point here where I can sell out and I can say, go on Patreon, get my crafting sheet, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that's great and all that. But it is better if you can do this yourself from a gold making perspective, because you will understand the numbers in the profession better, which it's just better to know that stuff when it comes to professions. And secondly, you can, when there are changes, you can quickly get numbers again yourself. Like I said, you can lose some gold from doing it, but you can quickly get numbers yourself. So when, for example, that Bountiful Seasons file switches over, it is probably going to take me weeks to go through and get all my crafting sheet updated for the patrons and stuff like that. And let's say you do come onto my Patreon, you do get crafting sheet. If your profession that you want happens to be at the end of that list, you could be waiting 2 weeks. Whereas if you do this on your own, you can have it done straight away, and you don't have to wait for somebody else to update. The same sort of thing happens with add-ons as well. You are waiting for it to get updated. So you can be waiting for somebody else to update an add-on. You can be waiting for somebody else to do a crafting sheet update for you, or you can do the crafting sheet yourself, and everything's done much quicker and you are getting exactly what you want. So I do think that's the better option. So if you can learn this particular skill, not only would it be good for your gold making like this expansion, but especially next expansion when we're starting out and we have all these professions and everyone has different multi-craft resourcefulness, everyone has different knowledge points and everything like that. And if you can run all your numbers yourself, you know where you stand at least. I hope that's helpful, guys. A lot of you asked for this video, so like I said, that's why we got it done. Any questions, just let me know. And thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.